Thank you very much, Francois. Yeah, what a pleasure to talk to our friends tonight about a place in South Africa that is very close to my heart. I have to apologize up front for my voice. Unfortunately, my voice decided to depart with me over the weekend, but it is slowly coming back. So hopefully it will last the evening. If so, it's definitely not your speakers that makes that crackling sound. It's my voice croaking. Back to the Richtersveld. The Richtersveld, unlike most other South African national parks, where the focus is mainly on animals, in the Richtersveld, it's more about its botanical and cultural landscape, as well as the rich geology in the park. And I will share some of that with you tonight. So I would like to invite you to travel with me through the Richtersveld and discover for yourself why the Richtersveld, what is it that makes the Richtersveld unique. We will also have a look at some conservation challenges and threats in the Richtersveld and why that area is so subject to threats from outside. And then finally, hopefully, I will be able to convince you guys to put a visit to the Richtersveld in the near future on your bucket list. I will show many slides during my presentation, so the landscapes and all of that, please have a look at that and you will see what I mean when I say that the Richtersveld is one of the most beautiful parks that we have in our portfolio. Before I start with the presentation, I just want to give those of you that hasn't been there, or those of you that don't know where the Richtersveld is, I would like to just orientate you as far as the park itself. So the Richtersveld National Park is tucked away in South Africa's most northwestern corner, as you can see there on the map. We have actually two portions there, and I will talk about it a little bit later. The Richtersveld National Park in its entirety is about 182,000 hectares big, and it forms part of one of SANParks' 22 national parks. The next slide, I would like to share with you the Richtersveld National Park consists of two portions. The one portion is an agreement park. There's a formal agreement between SANParks and the local community, and that is the area in blue on the top of the map there. The agreement park, or the contractual park, is 165,000 hectares big. And then there's another piece of park at the bottom, which is 19,600 hectares big. It's called the Klein Duin 15 Mijlseberg portion of the park. The land is state-owned, so there's no agreement as far as that piece of land are concerned, and that is owned by the state and SANParks. There are also two other protected areas in the Greater Richtersveld, and we have in the east the Community Conservation Conservancy, which is recently being accredited as a World Heritage Site. And on the left-hand side, at the Orange River mouth, we have the Orange River wetland, which is a Ramsar wetland. So those two are also protected areas in the Richtersveld. The Richtersveld National Park also forms part of the II's Richtersveld Transfrontier Park. And on this map, you can see the Transfrontier Park. We've got the Richtersveld here on the South African side, and then the II's Hot Springs Game Park on the northern side. So the II's Richtersveld Transfrontier Park is 626,000 hectares big, which is quite a big area, and it then straddles the border of South Africa and Namibia. So the question is, what makes the Richtersveld different to other parks? I mean, we've got 22 parks, and certainly each park has got its own unique features, but there are so many universal features between parks. What is it that distinguishes Richtersveld from our other parks? And I would like to take you through a discussion and expose you to 4 things that I believe distinguishes Richtersveld. Firstly, I would like you to share with me the cultural heritage and history of the park, which I believe is quite unique. Secondly, the unique geology and the subsequent diverse landscape that stems from the geology of the park. And then to have a look at the diversity and endism in its flora. Remember when I started, I said, yeah, in the Richtersveld, it's not necessarily about the animals. It's about the endemic flora and about the geology and about the heritage. And that's why I'm starting with that in my talk. And then we will have a look at some unique fauna that occurs in the park. So as far as the cultural heritage and history are concerned, the first inhabitants of the park, of course, were the San. There are 2 archaeological sites in the park, one at near Tatasberg in the Kokerboomkloof area, and one just outside of the park at Jakkalsberg, where they had archaeological sites, and they dug up bones and fragments and stuff, and they've dated that to about 20,000 years old, which means that these hunter-gatherers frequently visited the park, and they frequently made use of these overhangs, those 2 overhangs in the park and just outside the park. They also left behind some petroglyphs. So in the Richtersveld, we don't find rock paintings like elsewhere in South Africa. These, what you see in front of you, are petroglyphs, and they used sharp objects to sort of chisel these figures out on dolomitic rock. And there are numerous examples of this inside the park as well as outside the park. Followed the Khoi pastoralists. They started to farm with sheep and cattle, livestock, and they moved into the area about 2,000 years ago. And here you can see them starting to build one of the Maikie's houses. They had quite a big congregation on the banks of the Orange River near Bloedrif or Aristrif. And then followed the missionaries. They moved into the area in the early 1800s, and this little church was a Rhenish church that was built in 1893 by the Rhenish Missionary Society on the little town of Kubus, just outside the park border. So the park actually starts on the other side of the mountains behind the church. Today, that same church that was built in 1893 still stands and can be visited today still in the town of Kubus. Following the missionaries came the prospectors. And that followed basically after Simon van der Stelst discovered copper in the Springbok area. And the first guy to move in was James Alexander. And he started mining inside the park. These ruins that you can see there is basically inside the park. In 1852, he started to prospect for copper at Kodas mine. And Kodas mine is where we still find the shafts and the ruins of their mining activities. And then, which made a huge impact on the area, was the discovery of diamonds, of course. In 1925, this guy on the left, a guy by the name of Jack Carstens, he discovered the first diamonds on the west coast on a farm, Obiep, near Port Nolloth. And that started a huge influx of people in the area. And also, you know, even today still there are claims by the local community against the state that the state they accused the state of stealing their diamonds, and they won court cases against the state. So the diamond discovery had a huge impact even today on the greater Richtersveld area. Then, after following the prospectors and the miners, came the European squatters. So there were quite a number of European squatters that squatted all over the park and in the Richtersveld area. If you look at this map on the right-hand side, you will see 3 farms that actually fell inside the national park. De Hoop, which belongs to Paul Avenant, not belong to him, but he got the rights to farm there. And then in the east, Grasdrift, that belonged to Gert van der Rensburg. And then the southern farm, Kruimekaar, which belonged to Albert Viljoen. Now, the lady on the top left, that was Daisy Avenant. They lived at the Hoop from 1939 until 1959. In the 50s, the South African government declared the whole Richtersveld area as a colored reserve, and then the whites were asked to leave, or forced to leave the Richtersveld. And many of these farmers then reclassified themselves as coloreds in order to remain in the Richtersveld. So top left is Daisy Avenant. Those of you that have been to the Hoop, the campsite, may see some familiar features behind her. And then the guy on the left-hand side, that was Gert van Rensburg. He found at Grasdrift, opposite Ausenkeer in the park. And let's move to present day. Presently, the Richtersveld is managed by a management committee. As I said, the Greater Richtersveld is now a reserve. And the Richtersveld, basically, if you look at the Greater Richtersveld, it's the area in front of you, the southern border being the road between Steinkopf and Port Nolloth. The western boundary is the Atlantic Ocean. The eastern boundary is the N7 between Steinkopf and Noordoever on your map of Joelsdrift on the South African side. And then the northern border is the Orange River. So inside that Greater Richtersveld, the management committee has got representatives from 4 towns. The main management committee offices are at the town Lekkersen. What a beautiful name, Lekkersen. And then the second town is Eksteenfontein. The third one, Kubus, and the fourth one, Sandrift. So these 4 towns and the management committee they were the people that Sandparks entered into a contract in order to run the Richtersveld National Park, the green portion on the top there. The present day inhabitants of the area are Nama people. They are descendants of the Khoi, and they are currently living in the Greater Richtersveld. They, of course, are a lot of Nama people are moving out of the area because of work opportunities that exists elsewhere, and the population of the Greater Richtersveld is diminishing at the moment. And with that, unfortunately, also the lifestyle and the heritage of these very interesting and proud people. They are really, I've spent many hours with them, and they are really special. And then in 1972, the then National Parks Board, SA National Parks Board, realized that something must be done to conserve the biodiversity of that area, and they entered into negotiations with the local people in order to come to an agreement to establish an agreement park. And it took them, as you can see there, many years, because only in 1991 was the Richtersveld National Park, the agreement park, proclaimed. So it was quite a long journey. I had the privilege to accompany my father in the preliminary research in the mid-70s to the Richtersveld when they started negotiating to proclaim the park. And finally, in 2003, the Richtersveld National Park and the II's Hot Springs Game Park entered into agreement, and the agreement was signed between the two presidents of Namibia and South Africa, and the Transfrontier, the II's Richtersveld Transfrontier Park was established in 2003. And that's basically the background and the history. As you can see, quite a unique cultural history of the park. I haven't even touched the surface, but as you travel through the park, you will be exposed to many of these heritage features of the park. Second on my list was the geology and the uniqueness of the geology of the Richtersveld. You only have to look at the slide in front of you to realize why people say that the Richtersveld is one of the Earth's most geologically diverse places. I mean, just look at the expanse of this alluvial plain in front of you and the majestic mountains at the back. And it's mountain range upon mountain range upon a mountain range. So, first of all, let's state that the Richtersveld is currently the only declared mountain desert in South Africa. There are actually only two declared mountain deserts in southern Africa, one being the Richtersveld and the other being the Naukluft Mountains in Namibia. So I think it's quite that already tells you a story about what you can expect when you visit the park. If you look at the Google Maps map of the park, and I've sort of shaded the park, and I'm going to take it away again. That is basically the park already underneath the shading. You can see an huge array of mountainous areas, here and there speckled with some alluvial plains, but most of the park is mountainous. This mountain is quite unique in the sense it's called the Van der Sterberg. And the Van der Sterberg basically dissects the park in two. And it also is one of the biggest determinants of occurrence of vegetation, of climate, of many things in the park. On the cooler western side, closest to the Atlantic Ocean, you will find that the rainfall is mostly winter rainfall. It's much higher than on the eastern side, which falls on the rain shadow side of these mountains. These mountains are huge. I mean, it's the alluvial plains is a mere 130 meters above sea level, and the mountains are in excess of 1,400 meters above sea level. So it's got its own climate and also its own difference in vegetation. Geologically, some of the oldest rocks in South Africa, you will find them in the Richtersveld or exposed in the Richtersveld. If you look at the mountains in front of you, the mountains right at the back, the higher mountains, are called the Rusentjieberg, and the mountains in front are the Paradysberg. These two mountains is home to the oldest rocks in the Richtersveld. They are 2,000 million years old. They are quartzites. And you know, if we take that South Africa, the oldest rocks in South Africa are the Barberton greenstones. And those greenstones are 3,400 million years old. Then the rocks in the Richtersveld are not far behind them. You know, you get three types of rocks. You get igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks, and metamorphic rocks. And in the Richtersveld, you will find at least three formations, not rock types, formations. Each formation may have 3, 4, 5 multiple types of rocks in them. But in each one of these categories, you will find at least 3 different formations. So your igneous rocks, a typical example of that is these beautiful granite rocks at Tatasberg, a beautiful mountain, and almost if you drive through the center of the Richtersveld, you can basically see the mountain all the time. Then if we move to sedimentary rocks, these are dolomite from the Numius Formation as you enter the park. And then, of course, your metamorphic rocks, there are numerous examples of this peacock ore. And this is the type of ore that basically occurs at the copper prospects in the park. Another interesting feature about the park's geology is it's the only place in the world where rocks from 3 glacial periods are exposed in outcrops. You can actually see rock from 3 glacial periods. By glacial periods or eras, we mean when the southern hemisphere or southern Africa was basically moved closer to the South Pole, and the whole of South Africa was covered under the snow or ice, and these ice glaciers moved over the bedrock, and these are the examples. So first of all, we have the Kaigas formation, which is 750 million years old. Secondly, we have the Numius Formation, which is 518 million years old. And in the third case, the much younger portion of the Karoo supergroup, the Dwika Formation, which occurs on the eastern side of the park, the Dwika Formation, that's only 350 years old. Then there are quite a number of geological features in the park. This is called the Wondergat. It occurs at Cornelsberg, and it's a dolomite sinkhole, which is about 43 meters deep. So if you do your calculations, 43 meters is almost 12, as high as a 12-story building. It is a sinkhole. It's about 2 meters by 2 meters. And it goes down 43 meters into the ground. And like I said, it occurs on a fault and into the dolomite next to the Cornelsberg. Another interesting geological feature is the Hand of God, the so-called Hand of God, also visited by many tourists. And then we've got the toe of the Toon, which is a granite outcrop near Tattersberg. Some people also refer to it as eierkop. And then hoenderbeentjies, or the drumsticks in the Tattersberg, just behind the Toon. And then we also have our own Queen Victoria in Richtersveld. Even she is imprinted in some of the rocks there. So there is Queen Victoria with the beautiful Tattersberg at the back. Another interesting geological feature that occurs in the park, if you look at the aerial photographs of the park or even Google Maps, you will see these black stripes running from the north to the south all through the park. I mean, some of them are quite wide, like the two straddling the Ganakori River. But you can see from left to the right of this map, you will see these stripes running from south to north. They are called the Ganakori Swarm, and they are intrusive rocks that if you drive through the park, you will see those black stripes running all over the park. So they are basically intrusive rocks that intruded into the existing bedrock, and then cooled down and solidified, leaving these stripes in the park. If we move to the landscape, her landscape, of course, stems from the geology. You will see that the landscape is quite diverse. We have these huge alluvial plains in front of us, and at the back, these spiny mountain ranges that's up to and even more than 1,400 meters above sea level. This is a beautiful picture of the Springbok Vlakte alluvial plain in front of us, and at the back, the Rusaintjieberg Mountains. We've got these very wide dry river beds that only runs when in the rainy seasons. And I'm sure many of you have watched the WhatsApp videos of campers that got surprised, that camped near the Orange River, that actually got surprised with runoff water that came down these rivers. And you can imagine, this river is about 60, 70 meters wide. Fill that with about half a meter of water and channel that through a funnel at the bottom of about 5 meters wide. You can imagine what devastation it can create. And then, of course, the northern border and eastern border of the park is South Africa's biggest river, the perennial Orange River, which brings totally new other dimension to the park as well. So we spoke about the cultural heritage and the geology. Let's move to the plant diversity and endism of the park. It is the number of plants, especially succulents, and the number of endemic plants that occurs in the park, and the degradation of land led to the Richtersveld being recognized as one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots. You know, when I say degradation of land, I don't only mean degradation due to human interference only, but the degradation of land, actually, there are so many aspects, and we're going to touch on some of them tonight. First of all, you know, climate change has got a huge impact on the Richtersveld, more so than any other place in our country. Mining is another aspect. Overgrazing is another aspect. Poaching is another aspect, and we will deal with that. More than 3,000 plant species occur in the park, inside the national park, of which 400 are endemic to the Richtersveld or the Greater Richtersveld. And that is quite a huge percentage. More than 10% of the plants that occur in the park are endemic to the Richtersveld. And that is certainly something to cherish and to conserve. If you look at the park itself, the biomes that occur in the park, it's quite interesting to note, and who would ever think that you will be able to get a desert biome and a fynbos biome, which is actually linked with the Cape Floral region in one specific habitat. I mean, and there we have it. As you can see, the fynbos biome occurs mainly on that Van der Sterberg mountain range that we had a look at. Very high altitude and very moist because of the mist that runs in from the ocean. And then we have the succulent Karoo biome, the darker area, and then the light area is desert biome. So each one of these biomes obviously will have its own features and different vegetation. We spoke about endism and the endemic plant species, and we said that there were 400 endemic plants in the park. So once again, I would just like to highlight the actual park to you. And that is, you will see that we have the contractual park up north, and down here we have the Kleinduin Grabies Wes, 15 miles berg area of endism. So if you look at the specific areas of endism that was identified inside the Greater Richtersveld, one can see that there are quite a number of endemic areas inside the park, as well as inside the 15 miles berg area. And one can, you know, the mere number and different names will tell you that that you can expect different plants in that area. So let's have a look at some of the endemic plants that occur in the park. First of all, the Aloidendron bilanzi, or the giant quiver tree as we all know it. The giant quiver tree only occurs in an area about 300 square kilometers. That's 10 kilometers by 30 kilometers wide. It's known from one or two locations in the Richtersveld and just north of the border of Namibia. And there's actually a very small population in Namibia. And we will later come back to our giant quiver trees because they are highly endangered at the moment. While we are with the tree aloes, let's move to Aloidendron ramosissimum, or the so-called maiden's quiver tree. So the maiden's quiver tree is not is endemic to the greater Richtersveld area, also south of Namibia. It's not as endangered by climate change, but certainly overgrazing is a major problem, especially on the smaller plants that occur in that area. But it is also endemic to the greater Richtersveld area. And let's still stay with aloes. The Pearson's aloe, which is currently maybe the plant that are the most threatened in the park. Aloe pearsoni, they only occur in a specific area inside the park. Their area of distribution is only 52 square kilometers, which is 5 k's by 10 k's. They occur mainly in the Paradysberg, Helskloof area, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later as well. Another endemic, aloe mayeri. This interesting, almost hanging aloes. Not almost, they are hanging aloes. They occur only in the Rusaintjieberg, Venstervalle, Helskloof area of the park. They only occur in the Richtersveld National Park. And then recently discovered, when I say recently, in the last 30 years, Amaryllis paradisicola, or the paradyskloof lily, are endemic to a very, very small portion. They only occur in 2 locations inside the park, near Paradyskloof, hence the name. And it's you will agree, it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lily. Like I said, only discovered in the 90s, and endemic, very endemic to the park. Then we've got a very localized habitat specialist. There's only about 5 locations where they occur in the park: the Gladiolus deserticola. They are potentially threatened by overgrazing, and they occur in remote sheltered valleys in the Richtersveld. What a beautiful little plant. Then also we've got this Moraia. It's family of the Enki family. And what's interesting about that, it only occurs on one mountain range in the park. It's the only place in the world where it occurs. So it just shows you how vulnerable and how endemic it is. In the past, actually, it was very rarely recorded because they only flower after very good rain. And because rain is so few and far between in the Richtersveld, people often oversee them, even the researchers oversee them in their endeavors to record these species. There you can see the Moraia, the Enki's flowering after a good rainy season. These plants are also known from one location only, also highly threatened. It's endemic to that one location in the park, and just outside of the park, and also endangered because of overgrazing. And then finally, in the Richtersveld, just like I said, only a few examples. I mean, there are 400 of them. We've got this Stapelia species, and that occurs in the area of Tomarog Pass, only there. Highly endemic. So I would like to move down to 15 Mouselberg, because 15 miles, people often ask, but why this loose piece of land in the south? What's the significance of that? And the significance, I will show to you in the next slide. Look at the number of endemic and near endemic species that occur only on 15 Mouselberg, and these species are endemic to that mountain only. So that piece of brown 15 Mouselberg that you see at the bottom, that is basically the plants that occur there. And you will see that there are quite a number of endemic and near endemic species that occur on the mountain. If I count quickly, there's at least 9 endemic species on the mountain. And these are a few examples of them. Conophytum, currently the plants that are undergo a lot of poaching in the whole of Namakwa land. So those species are endemic to 15 Mouselberg. These Anacampsperos scopota, also endemic to 15 Mouselberg. Tylicodion botlei also occurs in 15 Mouselberg. So those are the plants endemic to that area. If we look at some other interesting and scarce plants, look at this beautiful, that yellow line is 1 centimeter long. This beautiful little example of Anacampsperos. The local people refer to them as hasikos, that occurs there. And you can easily miss them if you just walk over them. Pagopodium namakwanum, the so-called half-mains. Beautiful plant, also threatened due to climate change in the area. And then this little plant is quite an interesting plant. Strumaria pidentata. They're not very successful with it, but they actually plant themselves. They are adapted in 2 ways to survive in the Richtersveld. The next slide I will show you, they secrete a very sticky substance on their leaves, which basically attracts sand to the leaf, and that sand almost harness protects the plant from the sandstorms that occur there, and that is a way that the plant ensures its own survival by protecting it against these sandstorms. Another adaptation the plant has got, once they are in seed, the plant basically, the seeds will then lower, the stem will lower the seeds towards the soil, and it will actually bring the seeds closer to the soil in order for them to, when it fell off the plant, it basically is close to the soil, and it will plant itself almost. Very interesting. That those are the leaves. And then just look at this Cheiriodopsis plant, also beautifully adapted. You know, these capsules will only open, you can see one, if you wet them, the plant thinks rain fell, and it will then only open these capsules and release the seeds of the plant. Another interesting, look at that beautiful name, Baba Bokies. It certainly resembles Baba Bokies or baby bumps. And then I spoke about the conophytums. These conophytums are currently the plants that the poachers are after. This one, unfortunately, is a bit dried out because of the drought, but in spite of the drought, it still pushes these beautiful little flowers from them. And that is basically why people want them, because they need very little water, they look beautiful in a windowsill, and they carry these flowers for many months. Now, this plant may look quite big to you. I have asked Beth, my wife, to put her foot right next to the plant, and it will give you an indication of how tiny the plant really is. You will see that little flower and the actual plant is almost as big as the eye of her shoelaces. They are minute, but they are currently very sought after, and a guy was caught, some Korean guys were caught with 500,000 of these plants in bags, which was poached in the Namakwa land, Richtersveld area. So the Richtersveld, is very interesting. It does not reveals all its secrets at once, and every now and then new species are discovered on a regular basis. Actually, I've already spoken about the Paradijskloof lily, which was discovered in 1989. Recently, in 2013, there were 2 oxalis species discovered near Kokerboomkloof. That's 2 totally new species of oxalis. And then one of the biggest breakthroughs was Pieter van Wyk, the local curator of the nursery, and someone that whenever you visit the Richtersveld, you must put on your bucket list to visit and have a chat to him and visit his nursery. Pieter discovered these Orthona species growing in one specific, and believe me if I tell you, Pieter has traversed the Richtersveld on foot from north to south and from east to west. And he told me, he said to me, Willie, when I crossed this ridge, and he approached this ridge from a totally different site than previous researchers, and he saw this totally new plant that was never described, and only in 2020, he was in awe. And botanists confirm that it was totally a new species of Orthona. And like I said, the ones that you see in this photograph, that's it. It only grows in this little valley, as I can put it, in the park. A beautiful discovery and a feather in Pieter's cap for discovering this tree. Then there are also some interesting fauna in the park. Like I said, it's not about the fauna, but the Richtersveld fauna, there are 40 mammal species that made the Richtersveld its home. There are more than 200 bird species. And what is quite unique about the bird species, because the Richtersveld National Park is so close to the ocean, you often find marine birds coming from the ocean in places like the Hoop and that area. There are 52 reptilian species, and then 8 freshwater species, and an array of insects and arthropods in the park. Hartmann's mountain zebra. There are only 3 areas in South Africa where they occur in the wild. And one of them is the Richtersveld. The other 2 are Gugap and Augrabies Falls. Hartmann's mountain zebra is of course a subspecies of the mountain zebra, and they are actually endemic to Namibia. But like I said, there are small populations of Hartmanns occurring in the Richtersveld National Park. This is quite an interesting fella. The Dassie rat, very shy, and if you are in the Richtersveld and you come across these populations, it's quite a special sighting. It's of course a rodent, as you can see, but not actually directly related to mice and rats. It's actually the only surviving member of its order and its family. The order is Petromus, and Petromus actually means rock mouse. It resembles a mouse, and quite interesting features. They live in colonies, and I have only seen about 3 colonies of them in the Richtersveld. And then, of course, the round-eared elephant shrews. We all know that elephant shrews are not mice. They're not rodents at all. It just resembles mice. What is interesting about this specific species, there was a guy by the name of Robert Jacob Gordon. He was actually the captain of the garrison of the Dutch in the Cape Colony, and he traveled the interior of southern Africa. He first discovered the Orange River near Betuli, and he then visited the Orange River in the Richtersveld, between the Richtersveld and Alexander Bay in 1779. And he first, when he visited the Richtersveld, he first described this, it was the first time this round-eared elephant shrew was described by Robert Gordon in South Africa. That was his drawing and his writings underneath, and the description of the elephant shrew. And that was done, like I said, in 1779. Another interesting feature, I mean, it's not sommer enige scorpion. This day walker, you know, scorpions, they normally hunt at night, but this guy is active during daytime. It's one of the, or not one of, it is the biggest or largest scorpion that occurs in South Africa. It's called black thick-tailed scorpion, or commonly referred to as a day walker. And they can grow up to 18 centimeters long. And believe me, they are quite huge. So also quite unique. Let's move to challenges and threats of our beautiful Richtersveld National Park. And bear with me, I know that you guys have been with us for almost an hour. We're almost there. I would like to share with you a few thoughts on climate change, on the complexity of an agreement park, on poaching and human destruction, and on mining. So let's look at the climate change. As far as I'm concerned, there's no better place than the Richtersveld to experience the effect of climate change on plants. Climate studies over the past 15 years indicate that significant increases in average temperatures, an increase in the number of days with temperatures greater than 35 degrees Celsius, lower precipitation, and then also expanded periods between rainfall. And lastly, severe windstorms. Speaking of which, if you look at the satellite photograph, you will see how severe those windstorms actually are. This one in the south stems directly from the Richtersveld. These bergwinds can destroy plants and and moisture in soil in a day. If you look at the long-term vegetation conditions of the area, you will see that most of the park, this area here, are below normal vegetation conditions, which is quite disturbing. And that is mainly due to climate change. The question is asked, is the flagship of the Richtersveld sinking? And by the flagship, we mean this beautiful Aloidendron pilanzi. Now, this specific tree, I took this picture about 10 years ago. This tree subsequently has died. It's only the stem that stands there. This tree is at least 30 feet high. It was a beautiful specimen, and they are dying at an alarming rate. And I'm going to share some pictures with you now. These pictures were taken at Cornellskop, and they were fixed point pictures, photographs that were taken. In 1950, we counted 14, or they counted 14 live specimens of giant quiver trees. In 1995, they only counted 8 live specimens. And in 2004, only 6. And these trees, they can't handle climate change at all. And they are definitely dying because of, first of all, climate change. Secondly, overgrazing. And thirdly, specimen collectors, of course, take the young ones out. And here you can see another picture as well. I took these. These ones were taken, I think, in the first ones were taken in during my first visit in the 80s, late 1980s. And the second one was taken in the late or early 2000s. And there you can already see that the population has decreased significantly. Another species, and we spoke about it earlier, Allopersonnae, is under great threat. I'm quickly going to share pictures with you. I took this picture in 2000 at Paradijskloof Mountain. And here you can see the population were quite dense. Even those at the back, those are all pilanzi. And they look rather healthy. This picture was taken last year. And I think you can see devastation. They are dying, according to Peter van Wyk, since 2017, almost 60% of the Pearsonnae on Paradise Mountain died. His own pictures, here you can see this was taken in 1994. The green indicates live plants that were GPSed, and the picture in 2021, the red indicates dead plants. So another species that are devastated by climate change. And same goes for many other species. Just as a summary, if you look at this map basically indicates vegetation productivity trend between 1985 and 2018. And you can see in great portions of the park, it's very negative. The complexity of an agreement park, of course, poses its own problems. Initially, the agreement park was to help to improve farmer livelihoods without compromising the unique biodiversity of the area, especially the succulent plants and more specifically, the endemic plants. The question is, however, what is the chances for sustainable coexistence between farming activities and conservation on the one hand? Not all parties, unfortunately, in this agreement share the same conservation ideals. Overgrazing is a big, if not a bigger threat to plant survival as climate change. And I'll show you some pictures just now. Currently, the agreement allows for small stock units, 4,700 on a permanent basis and 1,900 on a seasonal basis. It's very difficult to control these numbers, and during my visits, it's obvious that there are far more than those numbers in the park. Overgrazing led to a loss of biomass, and there's scientific proof that the loss of plants further contribute to the change in the microclimate of the area. Fewer plants, more exposed soil, warmer climate. And then, of course, there's also the disrespect for infrastructure. There are some of these guys that feel nothing. They will drain a water tank to water their animals and don't think about the wilderness camp that also needs some of that water. So nomadic stock farming, they are allowed to farm in the park. And as you travel through the park, you will see many of them. This is just a picture to indicate to you the devastation of farming activity on the slope of the mountain. And there are many endemic species situated on that slope. Once again, overgrazing led to totally barren pieces of land in the park. And then, of course, poaching and human destruction. There are cross-border poaching. People from Namibia specifically, they throw out night lines and nets during nighttime. This was a operation between South Africa, our rangers on this side, and Namibian rangers to lift these nets and night lines. Thank you, Wesrand Honorary Rangers, for sponsoring the boat to the park. And then, of course, poaching of rare and endemic plant species lately became quite a huge problem. As you can see, these are all conophytum species that were poached. And if you look at the papers, I mean, conophytums for collectors worldwide, they want to get hold of it legally or illegally. It's mainly China and Korea that are involved. Last week, police arrested 18 suspects, and one consignment was valued at 500,000 rand. And here this week, we see that police and Cape Nature caught 2 Korean guys with thousands of conophytums, and fortunately, they were fined 2.5 million rand, which is almost better than the rhino poachers. Fines. Lately, the half-men's plants, the pachypodiums, are also under threat of poaching. Case 4 guys were jailed for 7 years after poaching these plants. And then finally, the destruction of cultural heritage sites. I mean, look at this. These petroglyphs were the original ones done by the San people, and then you get people that basically bring their own petroglyphs next to it on the rocks, which is actually sad. Mining operations inside the park, of course, legal and illegal, it's got a huge impact on the biodiversity. You can only look at this picture and you can imagine what there's actually no biodiversity left in this picture. The same goes for this picture over here. This is just a map just to orientate you that these sandlands drift. And these are all the mines operational by one mining company in the park. And the sad thing about it is that there were 2 new plant records for South Africa discovered near Potchefstroom. And the research report disclosed the following. There were 2 plant records discovered, and it's the only known place in South Africa where these plants occur. It unfortunately falls within a mining area, and they are now busy broadening the road towards the mine. and it could potentially lead to permanent loss of these species. The mining of the Potchefstroom Meso Orange River Terrace will lead to the closure of the campsite. And of course, with that comes noise pollution. That's not what we say. This comes from a report that was written about the mining activities. And then lately, there's a lot of illegal Zama mining that occurs inside the park, and it creates its own problems. These guys poach animals, they poach plants, they feel nothing for the environment, and it becomes a big problem in the park. And then, of course, development of the Boegoebaai project. It's still a way in the future, and it doesn't fall inside the park, but you can imagine, if you look at oil and gas refineries and renewable energies and light industry, of course, nothing will remain in this area of any so-called biodiversity. So why visit the park? Those of you that's still hanging there, I see the guys are there, my apologies. I just can't, I can't contain myself when it gets to this beautiful park. So I'll run through these slides quickly. Why will you visit the park? First of all, you will have to go out there and meet the people and experience a vanishing lifestyle. Go and expose yourself to diversity of its natural secrets, experience unique tourist facilities, and explore the outdoors. And let's have a look at some of them. If you are in the park, get out of your vehicle, talk to the nomadic farmers, speak to them about their heritage, their culture, and that kind of thing. They love talking to people. They are not beggars. They are actually very proud people, and they will seldom ask you for something. And they are very wise. They are very friendly. And often you will get to a place where you will find the aunties, they're busy building a Mikey's hut for their husbands to stay in when they travel through the park, and you can see actually how they construct these huts. A guy that you have to visit and talk to when you get there is Pieter van Wyk. He's an interesting guy. He's the curator of the Nursery and Botanical Garden. He's a self-taught plant expert. You won't always find him as neatly dressed as here, because he's more on foot than in the office. And often you will find him in the most remote areas without shoes after a field trip, but go and talk to him. He runs a beautiful nursery at Sendlingsdrift, and he's also involved in the rehabilitation of some of the poached plants. The people are friendly. The area is remote, no cell phone reception. It's safe. You don't have to lock anything. There are excellent overnight facilities. Fuel is available, and at Sendlingsdrift, you will also get the basic necessities at Sendlingsdrift. This is a photograph of Sendlingsdrift, the reception there. The chalets at Sendlingsdrift, there are 10 of them on the riverbank overlooking the Orange River, well equipped and serviced. The campsite at Sendlingsdrift. You can also cross the border at Sendlingsdrift. There's a pontoon there. It's not operational at the moment, but I spoke to the park manager this afternoon, and Brent assured me that that border will be opened on Friday. So once again, you will be able to cross the border there into Namibia, or to visit the Namibian side of the Transfrontier Park. There are 2 wilderness camps. The one is at Tatasberg, and these are the chalets there, also overlooking the very remote 4 houses overlooking the Orange River, with nice verandas, where you can have your G&T. The second one is at Hanakorip, the wilderness camp there, also well equipped with the most beautiful views. I mean, this is the view that it's more remote, it's not near the river, but you've got this Richtersveld Berg Mountains in front of you. Then campsites, there's a campsite at Potjiespram. It is a shaded campsite with good ablutions, also near the river. This is my favorite campsite, the Whip. As you can see in the front, with its own ablutions, there are cold water showers and flush toilets and wash-up facilities. So you can relax pitch your tent under one of the trees and enjoy the river. Then the third campsite is at Richtersberg, also right next to the river. This campsite is often flooded if it rains in the interior. The water comes down the Tatas River, and people are often caught off guard here at the Richtersberg campsite. Then the last campsite is at Kokerboom Kloof. That's remote, and in the interior, each campsite has got its own ablution facilities. Only flush toilets, no showers, because water is very scarce, so you have to take your own washing water. This is your view from Kokerboom Kloof campsite into that area. Just as far as accessibility of the campsites are concerned, I see I've made a spelling mistake there. You can get access to all the campsites and wilderness camps with a high-rise vehicle, preferably a 4x4. This part, the little pass here in front of us, is called the Akadis pass. It is preferred to do it in low range, and you can reach those campsites with off-road caravans. The adventure activities in the park. There's plenty of off-road driving in dry riverbeds, rocky roads. So if you're an off-road adventurist, there's enough for you to do there. There's mountain biking opportunities. Basically all of the roads are accessible for mountain bikers. And if you're a keen mountain biker, you can even enroll for the Desert Nights mountain bike adventure, which takes place every year. You can go onto the Venstervalle hiking trail. It's a 4-day, 3-night hiking trail into the Richtersveld Mountains. They use Hakkiesdoringhoek as their base camp, and that is the Richtersveld Mountains there at the back. These are just some pictures of the views on the trail. You can even take a swim there in the Baba Buttons. And if you look carefully at the right bottom, you will see the actual hikers, and this is the type of terrain that you have to negotiate. You can go canoeing or kayaking on the river, do some whitewater rafting. You can do fly fishing. As a matter of fact, the Whip is fast becoming one of the top fly fishing destinations in South Africa. You can catch a few large and smallmouth yellow fish there. Or you can just go and relax and enjoy the flower displays, the landscape, and drink in nature. I mean, it's a beautiful place to go to. So thank you for joining me on this trip. My apologies, it took a bit long. If you're interested, the SHR, we have a joint venture fundraising trip to the Richtersveld every year. This year we're going there from the 17th to the 24th. Some of our HRs have joined us in the past and have joined us on a trip there. If you are interested, you're more than welcome to give me a shout. My email address appears there and my cell phone number, but I'm sure you'll be able to get it from Groenkloof. And like I said, we still have about four places on this year's tour. And like I said, it's a fundraising tour for the Richtersveld National Park wish list, and you're welcome to join us. And with that, thank you. My apologies for the time, but that's all from my side, Francois. Thanks.